Hello. So, the last two speakers were experts in their subject. I am not. I actually do container orchestration in the cloud, but I'm going to talk about strategy, which is a lot more interesting for most people. Be very, very glad you don't have my container orchestration talk. So, just a little bit of background. I own and run a software company, have done for years, and this is really the result of me thinking I was supposed to be more strategic and trying to work out what that meant. Is anyone here an expert in strategy, by the way? No? Good. So we're all supposed to be being strategic in our jobs, right? It's a thing you're supposed to know about. But I found from reading around it and talking to people that really nobody has the first idea of what strategy even is. If you ask people to define it, they've got no idea. And you see a lot of people talking about strategy as if it's some sort of permanent, historical, immutable thing. Legendary words here from Helmet and House of Pain from my childhood. Because I'm gifted, I read Sun Tzu and I bought a gun too, so you'll never come too. I loved that when I was about 17. Sun Tzu, you hear a lot about Sun Tzu if you look at strategy. He was a medieval general, pre-medieval Chinese general, and he's often quoted as being a great resource for people who want to know about strategy. Sorry, I'm supposed to stand over here, aren't I? So I've read some Sun Tzu, and you'll be very surprised to know he's fucking irrelevant. There is literally nothing in a pre-medieval Chinese general that has got any relevance to anything. I mean, there's a lot about laying siege to walled villages. I've never done that. Yeah, well, yeah, give me a chance. So that's what you read about. Our actual experience of strategy in business is a bit more like this. Like once a year, if you're really lucky, you get paid to go to a hotel and you go and get asked to do some Myers-Briggs or something that's supposed to be somehow strategic. I bet lots of you have done this. I know I've done it more than once. A 15-part course on business strategy. Imagine. So anyway, I started having a look around and trying to work out what strategy was. And there are some other authorities who are often quoted. Karl von Clausewitz, famous German general, still routinely quoted. The talent of the strategist, I won't do that anymore, is to identify the decisive point and concentrate everything on it. This is his entire strategy was really about this, trying to find a spot and just bombing the hell out of it forever. Hence the First World War and all of that. That went really well. And you see people quoting this as a way to approach business, right? In my business, I shall identify the decisive point and concentrate everything on it. It's just nonsense, absolute nonsense. This is the boring strategy. The determination of the basic, snore. Alfred Chandler was very authoritative in sort of the 20s and 30s or something like that. And lots of enterprises, that's what they did for strategy was, this is before real computers, so no, maybe there were real computers, rooms full of people doing sums, allocating the resources necessary for carrying out their goals. And here's John Kay. This is probably the most realistic definition of strategy in the 21st century, is a synonym for expensive. And whenever you see strategic put against anything, that's really what it means. It's going to cost you 10 times as much. So, this chap is probably the greatest strategist that ever lived, I think, which is quite a claim. So he was presented with something of a problem when he decided he was going to liberate India, in that it was the jewel in the crown of the world's mightiest empire, who had a very long history of brutally repressing anyone who attempted to stop them ruling everything they could get their hands on. They had all the guns, they had all the money, they were in charge, they were a little bit battered after the Second World War, has to be said. And he had very little. I mean, the people who he supported and who supported him really didn't have anything. They were poor, they had no weapons. The top layers of society had been kind of co-opted by the invaders quite cleverly. in a sort of what have the Romans ever done for us kind of way. And what he developed was an approach of non-violent disobedience on a scale that had really never been seen previously. Now, he's often sort of thought of as being a pacifist, and he was a bit weird, it has to be said, but he didn't pursue non-violent disobedience because he somehow thought that it was right. He thought it was because it would work, and it was a strategic choice to the specific environment in which he found himself, and it worked. And India was indeed liberated, and then he got assassinated by a Hindu nationalist. Now, the reason it was strategic is that it was directed. It wasn't an accident. He decided to do it. They had clear goals and a coherent approach. They had, rules and instructions on how it would happen and how it would work. I'm pretty confident if he thought armed insurrection would have worked, he'd have done that instead. So they consciously looked at the other options. And this is the bit that, if you read about strategy, it comes out again and again and again, is there actions that are designed to influence the choices of other people. So when you are being strategic, you are working in a landscape in which there are other actors who will make decisions and that your choices influence theirs. And that was the point of the non-violence. It's not like just sitting there doing nothing makes you win, right? It's that it changes the choices that the other people have, which it did very effectively. So, if you read about strategy now, one of the other things you see a lot of is game theory. Who saw this thread on Twitter when it came out? Yeah. Oh, that's a shame. It was hilarious. This guy, I don't know how much coke he was doing. It was absolutely incredible. He spewed out, it was about a 300 tweet storm that was notable for having no game theory in it whatsoever. It was just a massive rant. And he got the piss taken out of him quite royally. So anyway, game theory has typified a lot of what people think of as being strategic, and that's because it's a sort of an attempt to mathematically express what happens when you've got choices and other people have choices, and I do this and they do that, and then they see me do the thing and all that kind of thing. The guy who invented it was John von Neumann, who also invented the modern computer, at least as a model. The von Neumann machine, which most of your computers and phones and things actually are von Neumann machines under the hood. And again, you can see here, real life consists of bluffing, blah, 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 and asking yourself, what is the other man going to think I mean to do? You can tell he was writing in the 1940s because he just said man, but you could get the point. He again is talking about, what do I do in a landscape of other actors? The classic game theory representation is the prisoner's dilemma, which is an interesting game. Sorry, I keep tripping over this cable. It's starting to really get on my nerves. The idea being that if you have two prisoners who both potentially could confess on the other, and if neither of them dobs in the other guy, they both get a year. You can kind of see the outcomes there, and this sort of in itself can typify a situation where two people have a choice of betrayal or trust. And it's interesting that iterative prisoner's dilemma can be used to represent lots and lots of human relationships quite accurately. I won't go into any more detail. You can go and read about it really easily. So, the classic example of game theory in real life, allegedly, is the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, nuclear deterrence is a quite explicit attempt to influence other people's choices, right? I've got the nuclear weapons, but I'm not going to fire them unless you fire them first, right? So I've got weapons that I promise never ever to use, and that's my threat, right? Unless you fire them first. So that's explicitly game theory, right? It's explicitly a strategic weapon. They are indeed strategic nuclear weapons. You don't own them because you want to blow the other guy up. Now, the problem was, and people were pretty confident this would work, but the problem was that it very, very nearly didn't work. And these guys came very, very close to blowing everyone up. There were a number of reasons for that. Part of it was because the game theory was crap, actually. They had this strategic model they called escalation. The idea being that clearly just going like either we blow the world up or we don't doesn't give you much room for maneuver. Oops, we blew the world up. Oh well. Game over. So So they came up with this idea of escalation, where what you do is you sort of threaten to blow the world up, and then you get a bit like, no, really, we really are going to blow the world up. No, I really mean it. It was all a bit nonsense. They ended up with this really stupid game where they communicated entirely by military manoeuvres. Nobody was talking to each other. It was all just, our ships are moving 3 inches closer to your ships. Now we've escalated it. And in the end, Khrushchev phoned up Kennedy, and Khrushchev was like, I don't want to blow the world up. And Kennedy went, no do I. And it stopped. And seriously, that's literally how it finished. Was one phone call with them. And what it really showed was how little they understood each other. And how important actually understanding the other players is in terms of forming your strategy. And instead, they'd built these sort of towers of maths around themselves. They were sort of, in a sense, they were playing with themselves rather than with the enemy. Although not like that, well, maybe like that, who knows. And game theory is still really part of nuclear deterrence today. That's a Trident nuclear submarine, according to Wikipedia. And one of the things that Cuba showed is that being the first, threatening to fire first isn't great, because other people can blow up your nukes, right? By the time you want to fire them, they could have destroyed them. So all your fixed nuclear batteries are just targets, really. And the reason you have loads of them is because you want to have lots of targets in the hope they miss some. So the reason they're so keen on Trident is because it's a second strike weapon. The commanders of the submarines have got a safe the open if Britain is entirely destroyed. And one of the first actions of a new British Prime Minister is to write down the rules, the instructions. In the event of the complete destruction of Britain, what should you do? And mostly they're told to sail to Australia and do what the Australian PM says. Sometimes the Canadians. I think it sort of depends on the mood the Prime Minister's in that day. But of course, what they can do is they can fire afterwards, because they're supposed to be lurking under the sea, and they're second strike weapons. And that's, again, a strategic decision, right? They are there to influence the decisions of people doing something else. So the history of strategy right up until the 1920s was primarily concerned with war, and the game theory stuff, there's a lot of war in there too. But where most of us come across it is in corporate strategy. And early on in the 20th century, that meant this kind of stuff. And there's quite a lot of famous sort of corporate strategy people who talked about these sorts of things, progressive improvement. They were dealing with IBMs and Ford, and let's make our production lines, 0.05% more efficient. These guys. And it's really boring, really, really, really boring, and utterly, utterly irrelevant to everyone in this room, I would guess. Because, by the time you squeeze another 0.5% out of what you're doing, the world has entirely changed again, right? You've got a new job title or something. One of the biggest problems with this, and the reason why most businesses now don't really concentrate on this much, unless they're in, just physical manufacturing, is because of the Red Queen's dilemma. It takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. But if you and the people you're competing with are just doing that, you're just making these marginal improvements, everybody's doing it. And actually all you're doing is working harder and harder and harder for the same margin. It's a bit of a mug's game, really. You really, really don't want to do that. Any marginal gains that you can develop are pretty easy for your opposition to copy. So when you go away on your corporate away day to talk about strategy, you're very unlikely to be talking about how do we squeeze another 0.5% out of our business. What you're much more likely to talk about these days is these sorts of things. Because this is how, the idea being, you can make 10 times your profit, not 0.05% more. Has anyone heard of blue seas? It's a thing. It's quite a nice idea, really. The idea being, it's compared with red seas, right? The red seas are red with blood. And that's quite good. That's where everybody else is currently competing, right? Those are the red seas, all the sharks eating all the things, people eating the sharks, all sorts of horrible stuff. You don't want to... I don't eat sharks. Anyway, you don't want to go and compete in the red seas. They're not very nice. What you want to do is find a nice blue sea that is not full of sharks. There is no blood, it's nice and clean, and you can make loads of money. You have to do that by making your own new blue sea, right? Because all the other seas are red. And this is where lots and lots of modern hyper huge companies like Google and Apple and Facebook and all of those guys. This is what they're really attempting to do. Let's create an entirely new market where there is nobody else there, and then we can go and make absolute fortune, and with the support of intellectual property lawyers, we can stop anybody else from competing there ever again, and we shall be rich forever. And yeah, we will send our cherry red Teslas to the moon or whatever. Now, there are some companies that are brilliant at this, and this is one of them. They don't really ever invent anything. Apple, particularly, sorry if that offends anyone, but they don't really. They mostly copy stuff. But they're absolutely brilliant at inventing new markets. Absolutely fantastic. There are lots of phones knocking about, but the iPhone absolutely knocked it out of the park, and they basically owned that category for years. And you can see Amazon doing similar sorts of things. Do you know half of US households are Amazon Prime subscribers? 50%. It's absolutely amazing. And that's a category, that's a business model I would never have imagined anybody would ever have done, right? Spectacular. So that's Blue Seas. If you can go and invent a nice new blue sea and go and inhabit it, that's lovely, but you probably need massive amounts of money. So here's another one. Culture and values. I imagine quite a few of you work for companies that have got vision statements and stuff like that. We've got one. I'm not telling you what it is. And that... I actually can't remember. It's quite embarrassing. But this is actually strategy, right? Vision statements. Because what you're trying to do is develop the bits of your business that are not marginal gains, right? These are the things, if you could get the right culture and the right values in your business, you could be much, much more competitive than others in ways you can't really define because it's all a bit soft. It's also really hard to copy. Really, really difficult to copy. You can't go pop round somewhere and go, wow, this is a great place to work. I'll just make my place a great place to work just by, doing what they do. And you can see people trying it, cargo culting it and putting in ping pong tables and things, but, there are nice places to work with ping pong tables, but they don't make them nice places to work. And there's loads and loads of concentration on this. And really, if you do get some strategic consultants in to your business, this is probably where they'll start. It all sounds like bullshit, really, but be nice to them because there's very few other places you can start. Now, the other thing that people do a lot of strategy with these days is these things, alliances. It was not a massive part of the strategic corporate world of the early 20th century. But more and more, this is something that happens more and more, and probably lots of your businesses are doing these kinds of things, where you can do sort of co-opetition. What you're really looking at is what are called non-zero-sum games, where you plus some other partner, you can make more than you would have done otherwise. And for most businesses, this is probably the most valuable approach. There you go. Yeah. So a couple of final points about some very specific bits of strategy. Negotiation is really interesting because it is quite a specific instance of actual strategy in action, because you're often talking to another party whose choices you want to influence, and you want to do things to make it work, right? And they're right there, often across the table from you. I've been involved in a reasonable amount of business negotiation over time, and it's all right. I don't know, it can be a bit horrible. I've had a couple of really awful procurement departments I've had to work with. People think negotiation is like haggling, where you somehow win and you beat your opponent, who's like, damn, he got the extra 5%. That's not negotiation, that's an argument. If you want an argument, you can just go home, argue with your wife, whatever. Negotiation is different. It's really about these sorts of things. This is from my personal experience. Actually understanding what the hell the other person cares about is the most important thing. It really is. You often go in thinking that what they want is like the inverse of what you want, right? But my experience is always that they want something completely different. That person there, the way they get promoted is by achieving some random corporate goal. You have no idea what it is. And just work out what it is and help them get it, and you'll get a good result. Timing is very important. Anyone who's, ideally, the other person has to finish by a certain date, and you know what the date is. That's wonderful. That's so good. Sorry, I'm busy. Oh, I've just got 20 minutes. Oh, your deadline's in 20 minutes' time. That's brilliant. Controlling the process is also extremely valuable, and you'll find that experienced negotiators will begin a negotiation by talking about the process of negotiating. What order do we talk about the things? If you can control the order in which a negotiation occurs, you can often win very substantially without having too much difficulty. And finally, there's a thing called a BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This is, can I walk away from the table? You often end up needing to threaten to do that. You can only threaten to do it if you are actually going to do it, right? If it's obviously a threat, everyone will just laugh at you. You actually have to be willing to do it, right? And you need to know what happens when you do that, because you might have to do it. I've done it a few times in negotiations. It's spectacular. It really clears the mind for the other guys. Where they're like, oh, I don't want you to do that. Right. There's rarely any secrets. Actually, most people can understand the other person. It's not that the information is secret, it's just they don't actually understand it. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. So there's a great example of strategic failure ongoing at the moment, and I apologise if there's any Brexiteers in the room, but it's an absolute clusterfuck. And whether you like the idea or not, it really is a massive cock-up, at least from Her Majesty's government. There are two massive issues with it. They called a referendum not because they wanted to leave Europe. Certainly David Cameron didn't. He was trying to resolve internal differences in the Tory party. Look how well that's turned out. Woohoo! And then they went and triggered Article 50, which I just couldn't believe, because there are other ways, right? You could just go to the European Union going, I want a treaty change, or I'm just going to be awful. I'm going to be the worst partner ever. And it would have been sad, and it would have taken about a decade. But, they could have done it. They say, we want to leave, I'm not triggering Article 50, come on, let's go. But instead, they triggered Article 50, which was entirely designed to be so awful nobody would ever do it. The EU control the timing absolutely entirely, right? And that is really powerful. They control the process, which is also very powerful. And the leaving party has absolutely no leverage. And then, after triggering Article 50, they just continue to make it worse. They don't know what they want, which is quite important in a negotiation, knowing what you want. They've done quite a lot of bickering, playing the man and not the ball. They haven't really talked about the ball because they don't know what ball they want. They've just generally been stroppy. This no deal's better than a bad deal thing, right? It's posturing about their BATNA, oh, it's fine, we'll just go home, it doesn't matter. Utterly implausible. Nobody believes it. And then this stuff about a super secret negotiating position that we can't tell anyone, where the European Union has been negotiating trade deals on our behalf for 40 years. There are no secrets. They know everything. It's been spectacular to watch. Really, really, really spectacular. So anyway, again, I apologise if there's any Brexit fans in the room, but you're being conned as much as anyone else. Anyway, so that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.